Well, it's my pleasure again to welcome you to the Reed and Christine Halliday Executive Lecture Series. We're pleased to be joined today, in addition to our guest speaker, by President Matt Holland and Vice President Mark Archambault. But let me introduce our speaker for today. I'm particularly excited to introduce James Clarke. We tend to live, actually, for the last 6 months in the same neighborhood and have got to know each other a little bit, not as well as we would have liked. But in addition to the formal bio that I'll read to you, let me just indicate that these are really nice people, too. They just are, and I've enjoyed getting to know them a little bit over the last few months. But anyway, James Clarke is the managing partner of Clarke Capital Partners, a growth equity and alternatives family office. Prior to CCP, he directed Yellowstone Partners private equity and alternative assets and remains an affiliate. In late 2001, James founded Clearlink, based in Salt Lake City, Utah, working as CEO, then chairman. After nearly 10 years in online retail, James' stake of Clearlink was acquired in early 2011 by Pamlico Capital. You may know them better formerly as Wachovia. James has served on the boards of Havens Residence Club, 1-800-Pharmacy.com, and HigherView.com, among others. Within the Clarke Alternatives portfolio, the team has acquired significant ownership of Contour HD, Perfectly Posh, Vettel Q, and True Science, where he serves as chairman of the board. In his community, James has served on the board of advisors for Kingsbury Hall, as a trustee of on the board of the Utah Symphony, the Utah Opera, and the Deer Valley Music Festival. He has been a member of the Utah Technology Council and YPO. Currently, Mr. and Mrs. Clarke serve on BYU Idaho's President's Advancement Council and are founders at BYU's Rollins Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology. James has been recognized as a V-Spring 100 entrepreneur, an MWCN Utah 100 honoree on multiple occasions, and as a Utah Business Magazine 40 Under 40 business leader. Clearlink was honored in 2008 as Utah's fourth fastest growing company and is a multi-year Inc. 500 recipient. James is married to the former Andrea Earl of Holiday, Utah, who is also here joining her husband today, and they are parents to 3 children. He is an alumnus of BYU, Harvard Business School, and holds a master's degree from Oxford University. Pleased to welcome James Clarke.
Very kind of you. I'm thrilled to be here today. I really enjoy the association with UVU. When we sold the business, in the introduction, we had an opportunity to move wherever we wanted to go, and we specifically chose this Utah Valley because there's really something special here. We enjoy this relationship with Utah Valley University, our association with your fine president, wonderful dean. Thank you so much. I want to tell you quickly about your president. My first interaction with him was standing on a bus at a Hertz a Hertz bus going from LAX to pick up our cars. And this is the gentleman that would, offer a seat if there was a seat to be had. This is the gentleman that also I've served, as they had mentioned, on the board of the Deer Valley Music Festival and the Utah Symphony and Opera. And this is a stodgy crowd. This is the upper crust of the upper crust in Utah, and this area that attend these events. And of course, you've got this wonderful president that knows how to break ice. One thing you might not know about your good university president is that he has this fantastic sense of humor. So he stands up in front of this group and introduces the group called, of course, Pink Martini, was it? Right? And mentions, of course, to break the ice with this stodgy group, that what we do in Utah Valley as sort of a whoopee and a great thing is to add a double scoop to a single scoop of ice cream, introducing this alcohol-named and alcohol-themed group. I have to tell you, it's much funnier when he tells it, and you can appreciate that if you know your good president. We're thrilled to be here, and we really appreciate that. You might have noticed that this first slide here, of course, reads James Clarke, a fast failure. I own that. That's who I am, and I want to tell you why that is. So I grew up in a little town called Rexburg, Idaho. I was born in Salt Lake City, moved to Rexburg, Idaho, a little college town there. Grew up working on farms. I failed early. I was one who wanted to go take risks. I was, in college. First time I really had my opportunity to fail on my own. I ran for student body president of a university like yours. I thought I had won it. At this primary, I won 70% of the entire vote of the 6 candidates that were running. It was over in my mind. I stopped campaigning, and I got out-hustled. A year later, thinking that I would try my pursuits in business, bought what was my second and probably my largest failure, and that was a fourplex. And this was no ordinary fourplex or business that I was buying. It was one where when we pulled the drywall away to renovate it, rat carcasses would fall on my head. Dust was everywhere. They had no conventional furnace, and so we recreated that. I had no business doing this. I knew nothing about construction, nothing about that. Of course, I again failed, lost almost everything that I had in that moment, and had to retreat and regroup. Was failing in school, was failing at in what I was attempting to do as a businessman. Had failed in my pursuits in political science on a college level. But had to retreat and regroup and say, this is what I want out of life, and decided that I would never, ever get out-hustled again, like I had in that college election, like I had gotten out-hustled by not working as hard as I should have in that first business pursuit in a real estate venture. Retreated, regrouped, but I failed again. And that failure took place right here in our backyard. I had just finished school. I went out and took a job and thought taking a job working for somebody else was not for me. So I, again, tried on my own and started a company called iSatellite. You've probably seen the door-knocking companies. I know you've heard from Todd Peterson here on this stage and discussed those great companies and those opportunities. Many of you have maybe worked for those companies. I started one of those. We had about 100 employees. And it was an awful business for me. It was an awful experience because I didn't know what I was doing. I had not been trained in business. I didn't study business for my undergrad. And it was an extremely difficult situation for me to sort of understand and learn as I went. I had no formal training and found myself 2 years into this business, after having generated millions of dollars in sales, having zero profits. In fact, 2 years later, I figured out that I had to buy myself out of this business. So again, fast failure in about everything that I did. I don't think things turned up until I met my bride, who's with me today. And it's funny how those kinds of things change you and change your fortunes. But I think at the end of the day, it was coupling having a good support system with a wonderful partner, as well as deciding truly that I wouldn't get out hustled. I hustled really hard in this door-to-door knocking business, but it was not the right business and it wasn't the right time. So talking about bad timing, let me just fast forward to what that next business was. So we started a company called Clearlink. We've introduced my wife, and she was a big part of this. Her last name was Earl prior to us getting married, my last name being Clarke. Very original. Clearlink put the two names together, and that's us. That's where it came from. We started it in her basement. I convinced my fiance, who had no formal ties to me at the time, that she should invest her life savings. And you need to understand, my bride is one who loves to enjoy her mattress money, meaning that she likes to put money under a mattress, loves to look at it, make sure that it's there. When you're investing in a new business, in a new enterprise, you don't get to do that. And so with many a morning tear and her going off to work and paying for this business, and she was a great businesswoman, number 1 or 2 seller of OxyContin legally in the country at the time that supported this business, and it was a great thing, and it was a great early start to a marriage. So she supported there, but we weren't very lucky. We were hustling, we were doing the right things, but it was bad timing. This was 6 weeks after 9/11, and if you can remember that time frame, everybody thought that the dot-com was done. That the bubble had burst. There were all these crazy valuations on dot-com businesses, online retail businesses that were going away. They had all just completely plummeted. The capital markets were completely dry. There was no opportunity for financing, even if we could get it, or even if we knew the right people to talk to, which I didn't. But there was something inside us that said, keep pushing forward, keep trying to do this, keep trying to make it work. Luckily, we had great relationships with one of our vendor partners, and that was Dish Network. We found one web development group to build the tech. I didn't know a thing about technology. I couldn't program a line of code to save my life. But we found a great tech group, put money with them, started down the path. 6 months later, they went out of business. Never saw a product. Guess what? Same thing happened again. Second business that we engaged, paid money to. We're a little more careful this time, of course, not giving as much to them up front. Went out of business. So again, people and businesses in this tech space were dropping like flies, just to give you a reminder of what the climate was like. Of course, nobody knew what was going to take place in online retail. Luckily, we came in contact with a group called Odyssey Web. And Odyssey Web was a special group of guys. In fact, it ended up being just two. A great sort of leader businessman who had to fire their entire staff and keep just one programmer. So when we met up with them, it was two guys. They said, yeah, we can do it. And we said, you know what, no more of this writing checks. We're not going to let you guys go out of business. Here's the thing. We're going to align ourselves with you, and our success is your success. And it worked out really well. And they're our partners to this day. And in fact, that businessman partner ends up that he is now the CEO of Clearlink after my departure. So great partners. And I can't emphasize choosing great partners, whether it be in life or whether it be in business. So it was very helpful to us. And it wasn't until we had these great partners and these great opportunities that we really knew what we had. Let me fast forward now sort of to today. And I've added these brands right here because they were this very, very small shop, but these were the brands that they were representing. So a great group of builders, but they knew how to run a lean and a mean business. So you fast forward today, a little different logo there, right? Dean Wright talked about some of the accolades and things that I would not be surprised if fewer than 10% of you in this room even knew what or who the people at Clearlink are. It's funny that after 6 years of sort of banging the drum that Clearlink needs to be in Utah County, I move into an office at the mouth of the canyon, and just 6 months later, they've got 400 employees downstairs from me. So I just can't seem to get away from them. And it's a great thing. It's a great problem to have. But they're now in Utah County. About 1,100 full-time employees, top 25 private employer in the state of Utah, and very hyper-growth market and great opportunity. And the reason why we saw such growth, I believe, is because we took a chance and it took an opportunity on a marketplace where the competitive landscape had completely been decimated. It had cleared out completely. And so you're left with one or two players in each one of these verticals, and you can come in and you can really dominate. So our thesis was, listen, if we can go in, and here's the leader in the space that's selling consumer products, call it, any of these products that you pay a bill for in your home on a monthly basis, starting with Dish Network and DirecTV. If we can do it just this much better than them, we can own the market. And that's what we were able to do. And that's where, from an online basis, and we sell for, we mentioned Todd Peterson. I'll mention him again because he was a great mentor to me. We sell for Vivint. We represent those sort of offline properties and bring them online and do the sales and marketing for them. So really, just to give you a sense of what Clearlink is, we're going to these brands and we're saying, hey, lend us your brand, lend us DirecTV, ADT, AT&T, any of these brands, Verizon and so forth. And our sales pitch was, we will go do your marketing. People will click an order or they will call into us and we will generate a sale for you and we'll hand it back on a silver platter. It's a pretty compelling sales pitch to folks. And guess what? Guess what, brands? It doesn't cost you anything until we actually perform. So it's a performance-based model, and we didn't get too many no's. But the problem was attracting those first yeses for people to come through the doors, and it really started with Dish Network and DirecTV, and now the company represents between 35 and 40 brands online, about 40,000 unique URLs. And it's truly a technology powerhouse, at least in the state. But again, one of those companies that you might have never heard of because we tend to use the brand. We love to employ the power of the brand where they're spending millions of dollars behind this is ADT, this is Dish Network, this is this brand. We are able to leverage that, and you might never, ever hear of Clearlink again. And in some ways, that's a good thing for us. In some ways, it creates hiring problems because we need great people like you that are sitting in this room. So it was a great exit for us. We were thrilled about that. But I didn't know what I was going to do next. I had brought in this partner as a CEO to run things on a day-to-day basis. He was a fine partner, did a great job, helped really build the business, but I didn't want, of course, those golden handcuffs that come when somebody comes in and buys your business. Wanted to go do other things. Spent some time because we thought we were going to sell the business in 2008. Again, reminding you of economic climates, the world fell apart in 2008. So I spent some time on Wall Street, took an office there and said, I'm going to figure out how to be a savvy investor. I wasn't. I was an operator. And the benefit for me was I got to taste something different, something new for me. And that was to really step out of what my comfort zone was in online retail and sort of understand what a good investor is, what an anatomy of a good investment is for a guy like me. So we were able to look at various options and opportunities. And when the exit took place, we immediately got into what we're describing as growth equity. Let me just stop really quick, and I failed to do this as we started out, but if there are any questions along the line, if you want to interrupt me, if you want to hop up on stage with me, feel free to do that. I will really appreciate it, and I'll show you how much I appreciate your interaction and your questions. And we'll also have a formal Q&A at the end, but if there are any questions throughout the process, please make sure that you take a moment. I'll recognize you. But getting back to sort of what we do now, figured out that we would go into this growth equity model. So you've sort of got on the right-hand side, you've got private equity, big private equity, sort of like the company that bought us out. On this side, you've got angel investors on the very beginning. So these onesie, twosie, friends and family, aunts and uncles that will put money in to invest in your business. So you've got a lot of players over on this side, and then you've got true sort of early stage venture investors. A lot of these large private equities. Through this last election cycle, you heard a lot about Bain Capital, right? $70 billion under management. It takes a multi-billion-dollar deal to really move the needle for those guys. That's not us. We're neither one of those ends of the spectrum. We're right in the middle, and what we do is we invest in companies that have a proven concept where they have gone from $1 to $5 million of EBITDA. So, these companies are companies like Contour HD. We have a relationship where that company is in Best Buy. In fact, it's unfortunate because I tried on the way to speak today to pick up a couple of those. A good problem to have is that they were sold out of the cameras. There were a lot of accessories that we actually picked up, but that's in the Best Buy store. So this is a company that came to us, and I'll show you sort of what is a good deal for us as I sort of go through some of these. I don't know if any of you have heard of a TV show that's on Nickelodeon for sort of 6 and unders called Yo Gabba Gabba. This is another one of our sponsor companies that we're doing deals with, and it's really kind of fun. But this is our thesis. So our thesis is this laser focus on companies that are doing $1 to $5 million of EBITDA. So they've got earnings, they've proven the concept, they know who they are, they've had to pivot and pivot and pivot again till they're profitable, right? They have solid management, and I've outlined that and highlighted that because it's so important for us to deal with people that really are going to be there to stay. So this is a company that's built to last. These are the right people to operate. Listen, our DNA is that we are operators at heart that just happen to invest, but we want great operators to build their businesses and just sponsor them and give them fuel in the form of cash to go grow their businesses. Third, want them to be in this region. Fourth, the defensible strategy in the market, and then high growth opportunities. So back to Contour. So this was one of the first deals that we saw. It was a company based out of Seattle, Washington, good management. They were, you can see sort of by the numbers, they were doing about 15 million of revenue. You might not have heard of this company because they're a very, very distant second to a company called GoPro. Who's heard of GoPro? Everybody, right? Very few of you, I bet, have heard of Contour. It's sort of as we think of it at least, it's a little analogous to, say, a PC being your, sort of stodgy GoPro on the front of your helmet that might look a little like a Teletubby. And then your sleeker version of sort of an Apple or a Mac that sits on the other side. And I think Apple actually agrees with us because they've placed us in their store in Q4 of last year. And so it's nice to see that kind of validation in the market. GoPro is going to be a great number one player in the space. I think they did $500 million in sales like last year. Again, very distant second behind them. But we love to sort of slipstream and draft behind these kinds of companies where we can gain traction and get validation in terms of a comparison or a comparable to multiples of valuation. So they trade it, they'll probably go public at $1 billion, $1.5 billion valuation, 2 to 3 times revenues. A company like this, that ends at 2012 at about $50 million of revenue will go out at about 1/10 of that. So it's not a bad position to be, even though we're a distant number 2. We feel like with a great strategic partner, there's a great growth opportunity. So we like to identify these types of companies. True Science. Now let me tell you about this. Again, probably another brand that you haven't heard of, but when you walk into Walmart 2 months from now, if you have a pet, you're going to want to know True Science. This is a very, very unsexy business. It's just not great to look at. You don't want to, tell the whole world that you're involved in this pet medications business. It's just not cool like a camera. I think the camera is really cool. I like to talk about that a lot. This, on the other hand, is a group of individuals, well, now a group of individuals, but when I met them, it was 2 partners. A guy named Scott Adcock, who had been the COO of the Jack Nicklaus companies. He had done a favor for Jack, took the struggling Jack Nicklaus companies private when they were struggling publicly. The other partner, CEO, Cord Christensen, was the CEO of Polaroid, bought the license out of bankruptcy, grew it to about $1 billion of sales in about 2.5 years. So these are guys who know how to operate businesses. But guess what had happened? In the years right before this, they took their fortunes, probably $20, $25 million apiece, and they invested in what they thought was really safe, and it was Boise real estate. You can imagine that didn't go so well for them. But what impressed us as we looked at this deal, as they lost their entire fortunes, they protected their limited partners. In fact, they protected them so much that they even gave them interest in addition to that. So now, you look at the real estate market and say, yeah, it's sort of come back, and that's a great thing. But, these guys that invested in 2005 in multifamily housing and other things, lost it all. And so to look at these guys, that they had integrity, that they would repay these investors with interest and take the loss personally to even a place where they were losing cars and potentially homes and other things, these are the kind of guys I wanted to do business with. The problem was, what's the terminal value? They came to me and said, listen, we're selling this pet flea and tick stuff, and we like it. We've gone back to our partners at Albertsons, and we've gone to Kroger and all these places, and we think we can sell this. And I said, this just doesn't fit our thesis. We try to be disciplined people. We try to focus on certain things, but it doesn't fit. And guess what? They have the tenacity to come back and say, this fit. Can we do this or this or this? And finally, we put together a structure where we were renting them money. We lent them, for us, a solid placement is about a $2 million placement. So we placed $2 million with them up front as an asset-based line, which meant, of course, that we were doing that against all of the inventory. We were allocating that against their inventory. If the inventory goes away, we were in big trouble. So we watched that very closely. They were very good about their system so that we could watch them on a daily basis. But what they did, because of their expertise, is they figured out how to pivot and pivot and pivot again. They went to these big box retailers and said, listen, we want to make our fortunes back. We want to do whatever we need to do. What categories grew during this last recession? And their partners said, babies and pets. And so they continued to build these businesses around them. One clearly took off, and it was the pet space. And you can see now, so you fast forward to 2011, I've already given you the punchline, but they went from doing $2 million of sales in that first year when I met them. The first full year of business, they did about $50 million of sales. Last year, just over $100 million of sales, and this year they'll do just over $250 million, about $300 million of sales. That's what happens when you have great leadership and great partners, that very unsexy, maybe unsavvy or sophisticated businesses become very, very exciting to think about and dream about in what they're doing. So it's great to have good partners. And some people will say, and you might have heard this here in business school, you might have heard this here in this class, that if you partner with a retailer like Costco or Walmart, it's the best and worst day of your life. We haven't found that to be true. We love our partnership with Walmart. We think the world of Kroger, and they've been really helpful. So I've sort of, just to go to this slide, I've sort of described what our asymmetry is, what our differentiation is in the market as we invest in different companies. And I hope that after this meeting, I'll have a dozen of you that'll come and say, listen, I've got the next great thing, and I want to talk to you about that. Because that's how, that's obviously what we feed upon. We love, love, love great entrepreneurs. We love proven concepts, and we love early entrepreneurs and to help mentor and guide them. But you'll see it's a pretty crowded space as you look at this angel and venture space. Some of these folks you may know. We know them all well. We work with them. We have a healthy respect for them. But again, very crowded on this side, very crowded again on this side. Have great respect for all of these operators. Again, some of our differentiation and our asymmetry, and I'll say it again, is that we're not just investors. Most of these folks are just investors, really smart guys, great guys that I respect and love and revere. But we happen to be in a space where we can invest and operate. If we need to, we can get our hands dirty, our fingers dirty, because we've run businesses. And our team, some of them are here today, are all operators. We've run businesses and can help these businesses thrive and grow. And so that's what we love about being in this space. And if you think about it, going back to the slide and my mentioning Utah Valley specifically, if you think about the great tech that has come out of the Mountain West, or even Utah, in the last 25 years, I'd venture to say, and we've talked about this internally, as we put together the metric, probably 80% of the great tech and tech companies have come out of this valley. Not the valley to the north. This valley, here in Utah County. So it's a pretty special place. There's a great entrepreneurial spirit. That's why we chose to be right here in your backyard, and we're thrilled to be here. So I want to tell you about a quick story. You hear a lot about Warren Buffett, and I don't want to bother you with him. Listen, I have a great respect for him. I don't love his politics. It's really easy for a guy who's made all of his money to say, no, it's great to pay more taxes, right? But I like him, and I learned something really important for me early on. This was, what year was this? 1997, July 25th, I won't forget the day. A friend of mine was tasked to be the entertainment for Warren Buffett as he went through the new Utah, or I'm sorry, it was the Utah company that was expanding into Boise, R.C. Willey. This guy was a guy named James Conley. He had been on Broadway. He's an Orem, native, and invited me to go along. I was just cocky enough to think that I could lure Warren Buffett to come to Sundance, where I happened to be working at the time, to do this great sort of, they do that big Herb Allen and Company media event up in Sun Valley every year. And I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity for me to see if we can bring him to Utah. Of course, I love Utah. I'm going to try to bring anybody. But he said to me that day something that I'll never forget, and I've written the first part of it. And he said, I'm not going to try to do his voice. It's painful. My wife has heard me try to do this in his voice. It's a little raspy. But he said, James, when I was your age, I had far more good ideas than money. And he said, now, again, 15 years ago, I have way more money than good ideas. And I said to him, that's what I want to do. I hope we're doing that. I hope that, as he looks at, listen, he's not going to track a guy like me or know or remember this conversation, but it had a profound effect on me. Ideas are important, but execution is everything. As you're putting together or formulating businesses, or if you're working within businesses, your ideas are very, very important. I had this discussion yesterday around a boardroom table, but execution is everything. You have great ideas, great thoughts in your classes, you share those with your professors, but it's not unless you're executing on your work that you're going to get good grades, right? Same principle applies in business, same principle applies in probably anything that you can think about. These ideas, these thoughts are very powerful, they're moving, they're life-changing, but if you don't execute on them, no one will ever know. So it was a great lesson for me to learn about great ideas coupled with money, what it can do. And you can run out of them. I want to tell you a little bit about a phone call that I got to, and you look at these logos, and who can tell me what this logo is right here? Who said that? It's a woman, I'm sure. Right, at the top. Say it again. Lululemon, of course, right? It's the yoga clothing brand, right? They actually have a market cap that's about the same size as of the Gap. You probably all know the Gap. You don't know Lululemon because it's not everywhere yet, but it will be. I'm confident. At least my wife is confident of that because we spend a fair amount of time there. Right? It's a great store. It's a great brand. But I didn't know much about it. In fact, the first time my wife bought me a Lululemon jacket, I said, take it back. It was a jacket. It was a running jacket. And you know how much it cost? I'm embarrassed to say. $150 for a little sweatsuit jacket. I was embarrassed. But they have built this great affinity brand that people love on the backs of people buying sweatpants that cost $100 and jackets that cost $150 that your classmate up here loves. You do, don't you? You're smiling. But they're great, right? So great brands. You can see PetSmart, another great brand. What's the difference between Petco, PetSmart, right? I don't know. You tell me as you look at those. And of course, Staples. Who doesn't know Staples? We all know Staples, right? So I got this call one day. We were raising assets for this True Science company, this pet company. I pick up the phone. I was expecting a call. Didn't know exactly who was going to be calling me. And the guy says on the other end, "Is this James?" And I said, "Of course. Yeah, this is." And he said, "Well, this is Tom." And I said, "Hi, Tom." He said, "Well, this is Tom Stemberg," with a little more step into it this time. "This is Tom Stemberg." And I said, "Hi, Tom Stemberg." I'm shrugging my shoulders, not knowing who this is. He said, "Well, okay." Sort of shrugs his shoulders. I can see him on the other end of the phone in my mind's eye. And he said, "But I started this little company called Staples. You might want to take my call." And I said, "Of course." So we started talking, and he said, "We know you're raising money. We know you're out there busy with this pet business, right?" And I said, "Yeah, we are. But Tom, we've been working on raising this money for a long, long time. We've been working for 6 months. And you know what? We're closing in 2 weeks." And he said, "Okay, I'll put money in." And so he put in 50% as much as the other folks that were putting it in. It was a big sum that he was putting in. And he just scratched a check and did it just because he believed. He saw what we were doing. He saw the same thing in those great partners at True Science that I did. This is a guy that serves on the board of PetSmart, that of course founded what was at the time when he left an $18 billion market cap company, serves on the board of Lululemon, a true retail genius. And to be a genius, let's be clear, you only have to be a genius in one thing, and he is in retail, and he gets it. And we're fortunate to have him as a partner and a guy who will say, "Yeah, you're closing in 2 weeks, we'll do it." And that only happens if there's honor and integrity in your group and in your inner circle. And I want to talk a little bit about that. I learned some of these things from some great mentors that I've had in my life. I was a TA, and I had a great professor when I was doing my undergrad. And this guy was it was Professor Christensen. And he talked about having great mentors in your life. I put that little have not amongst the haves just as a reminder of where I come from. Little farm kid from Rexburg, Idaho. There's a book. Hemingway wrote a book, The Haves and Have-Nots, right? That's who I was. I got to watch people that built these great businesses. You probably have never heard of Diet Center, but it was the big thing that brought the genesis of like a Jenny Craig or a Nutrisystem and those kinds of things that sold ultimately, and the brand evaporated. But I got to watch these entrepreneurs that built that and watch the planes that they flew in and the helicopter that was parked at their house and all these things that they had and did. And as a kid, I'm sitting there watching and saying, "You know what? I'm just as smart as they are. I can do this." And so while all my friends were out there saying, "I want to be Michael Jordan," guess what I'm saying? I want to own the Bulls. Those were the kind of mentors that I had. I love basketball. I love to play basketball, but I know my limits. I'm this 6-foot kid that can jump from Rexburg, Idaho. So I knew my limits, but I knew that in the world of business that there are no limits. And the truth is, that's the great thing about America, and I've seen business in many other countries. You don't see those same opportunities there. Got to see great guys that you've seen here on this stage. Todd Peterson, started working for him in 1994, selling pest control door to door. Todd, a couple years later, took me under his wing and said, listen, James, if you want to be serious about this, here's some office space. So I officed right next to him. And he's great, and he still does that today. You should know that about him. He's a great mentor and a great friend. Another kid from the farms of Idaho that I've been able to watch and say, you know what, I love Todd. He's a very bright guy. I don't look as good in a baseball cap as Todd does, by the way. But he's built a great business by surrounding himself with great talent, and he's brilliant at that, and I applaud him. So he's been a great mentor there. Other great mentors, a guy named Spencer Kirk, probably a guy you've never heard of, but he's built these great businesses, sold a megahertz company. It's $1.5 billion company in Utah that you might have never heard of, because it sold early, sold to US Robotics, and then 3Com. You've probably not heard of the first two companies, but maybe 3Com, which is really not the company that it once was. And he'll tell you to your face that that was just luck, that they were lucky. If you tried to recreate what he did, building modems for laptop computers today, it's useless. So he was really lucky and really fortunate. But where he wasn't lucky is he did it again. He's got a $4 billion self-storage company. And if he can do it in the very, very high-tech world and then replicate that again in the very, very low-tech world, that's a guy I want to follow, and was able to grow up around him and watch him. And he'll credit one of his mentors, who's a guy named John Huntsman, whom I'm sure you've heard of. If you can witness it, you can do it. And it's great to have these great mentors, so surround yourselves with those mentors. Just want to share with you as we're going into Q&A, we've got about 10 plus minutes, 4 powerful principles that we use daily within our office that have been helpful for me as we've created companies, as we create enterprise value and work with entrepreneurs. The first is beware of entitlement. I didn't even know what entitlement was when we were starting our business, but guess what? I found out really, really quickly as we had these young entrepreneurs that had never had really any executive experience in any other business, and they're saying, yeah, I want 10% of your company. I'm not putting in $1, but I deserve it, because guess what? I'm your same age, and I work hard, and I was there at the beginning, and there was this great sense of entitlement. And guess what? It doesn't go away. And we had to really implement certain structures and countermeasures within our businesses to help people move away from that entitlement, sense of entitlement. And it doesn't just come from, I want to own a piece of your business. It comes in the form of, it's okay if I show up 15 minutes late. Hey, it's okay if, I put this on my company credit card. That's that entitlement, and it'll hold any person back, any person that's serious about business and progressing in a business setting. So beware of that. Second thing is, you can barely see this 1-800pharmacy.com logo, and that is one of the great disappointments. I love these guys, and I love this concept, but I loved it 6 years ago when I invested in it. It wasn't within our thesis, but I loved the operator. It's now 6 years later, and they don't have a live website. It's sad to me. And this picture to the right is an example of what took place right there. 1-800-Pharmacy was very important when we were approached with the concept. Not important at all. Amazon is taking over. They sell meds. They'll do it on a monthly basis, and they'll do it better than anybody else. And your margin is our opportunity, says Jeff Bezos, right? So it's unfortunate because they could never cross the chasm. They could never bridge that gap from one side to another and launch. And as an entrepreneur and as a serious business person, or anybody that's thinking about business, don't tinker. Bridge the gap, cross the chasm, and there's success or there's failure on the other end. But do like a guy like me and fail fast, right? On the other hand, Skull Candy, this is one of my failures where I didn't sort of cross the chasm. You guys, I'm sure, know Skull Candy, Utah-based company, Park City, was run by a really good friend, run by another good friend that was their founder, is back in position as CEO. Skull Candy came to me right as they started and said, listen, we need some investment. Can you invest? I had very, very little, liquidity where I could invest. I was putting it into my own company. I had to choose between putting it into Clearlink or putting it into Skull Candy. I put it back into my company. I'm thankful that I did, but guess what? I was offered an opportunity to buy 25% of the company for $500,000. When they went public, the day they went public, $500 million company. So with dilution, that's about a $100 million mistake for a guy like me. I make mistakes, but make mistakes fast so you can move on to the next ones, right? Don't make everyone a skull candy mistake like this. Jeremy and I have laughed about it and joked about it, and he remembers the deal. But fail fast and then move on. Don't whine, don't complain, own your mistakes and move on and do great things. And then something that we love, and we've always said in Clearlink, we say in VetIQ and True Science, it's been made famous now by Nathan Furr and Paul Ahlstrom in their book, Nail It and Scale It. It's a great concept. We were saying it, we were doing it long before it was a book, and it's absolutely true. Just figure it out. Whatever it is, pivot, pivot, pivot again, and just ramp up. Because once you've got something, and if it's something scalable, it's something that's going to have terminal value. You can either sell or make a great lifestyle business or however you want to run it. It's a great opportunity for you. Last thing right here, labor and honor. When I was a young boy, about 8 years old, started working for my dad in our yard. And every week he would write me a check, and I made about $4 a day to start out. Okay, so he's writing me a check at the end of the week for $20. At the end of the week, in the memo section of the check, you would either write, if I had done a good job, labor and honor, what it read on our family crest in the Clarke family. If I had not done a good job, if I had not gotten up on time and worked my 3 hours for my $4 a day, it was simply labor. When you're working, labor with honor. It'll make a difference in your life. It'll make a difference to your employer. It'll make a difference to your employees as you have them, to labor with honor. This is my first failure. A friend of mine framed this for me last year. This is that fourplex with the rat carcasses that I was telling you about. And at the bottom of that, you probably can't read it here under triumph. It reads, "Failure is known only to he who once faltered. Never summons the strength to try again." Failure. Triumph is known only to he who falters, fumbles, and fails. Then arises, attempts, and achieves. Let me tell you about meeting one of my heroes. You might not be able to see this little plaque there. Some of you may know who that is just by looking at the picture. But last year when I was finishing up a grad degree overseas, this guy was the former headmaster of my college, a guy named Roger Bannister. I'd grown up learning about him, hearing about him. He's 83 in this picture. It's right before the Summer Olympics in London. They did great spotlights on him. But guess what? This record that he holds right here for running a sub 4-minute mile, first man who ever did it, nobody believed it was even possible, didn't even place in the Olympics 2 years prior to that. Didn't even place in the Olympics. That's why you didn't see him as sort of that, the guy who's running the torch in at the London Olympics. Didn't even place at his own Olympics. Yet 2 years later, after failing fast, knowing what he wanted, set goals, move forward, set a world record, a record that he knew. And I had the chance to ask him, I said, "Sir Roger, did you know what it would mean to run a sub 4-minute mile?" And to my surprise, my wife was with me, because I thought he'd say, "Oh no, I didn't know it was going to be a lifelong thing." He said, "Absolutely. Yes, I knew what it would mean to run a 4-minute mile." And you hear about him. It's famous stories hearing about this guy that did the impossible. But the funny thing about that is 6 weeks later, somebody else did it. Something that heretofore or heretodhen had not ever been made possible. He does. Because he failed fast. He failed early, knew what he wanted to do, and it's changed his life and changed mine personally as I've watched him. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak. Thanks so much for being here. Are there any questions? Yes, please, at the top. Could you speak up a little bit, please?
At the very beginning, how many times you failed?
Yeah.
And you said you worked harder than anyone else. Like, how would you, for business students, what would be your suggestions? Like, we all want to work hard, but work smarter.
Yeah.
How would you suggest working harder and working smart so we don't just keep failing all the time instead of proving out enough? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think part of my problem, part of my failure is early on, I wasn't hustling. I thought I had it made. 6 other guys in this, competition to be a student body president share 30% of the vote. I've got 70. I think I've got it won. I don't hustle anymore. You're probably a much smarter guy than I am. You've already figured out work smart and work hard together. That's a big deal. So you know what you're doing. Yeah, couple those two together and you're going to be really successful. That's great. Please.
I'm working for a startup right now.
Great.
And the further that I get into working, I realize that more than ever, it's who you know and not what you know. It's obviously coupled with both.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what would you say to someone in my position to how do we get from being that kid from Rexburg to knowing the people we need to know to kind of make a difference in the business world? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, how do you get sort of from leveraging relationships to a stage of, if you could repeat?
So where the people you know can make a difference in your business.
Yeah.
Where you can take it from a startup to, I know this guy, so my business is going to...
It's really interesting is, listen, I'm not a terribly old guy. I'm 40 years old. So I've watched different stages, different careers. It's finally where sort of my vintage of my contemporaries, like you're describing your contemporaries, are guys that are CEOs of businesses, right? And I don't know how old you are, but it took a while for us to sort of see our first group of CEOs that could really make an impact of sort of picking us out, as the most talented individuals within a group. So yeah, part of that is time. The other part is, it's really easy to be that guy when you're the CEO. And that's what that was the question for me. I knew that I wasn't ever going to be hired to be a CEO, so I had to go make that decision myself. So thanks for the question. Please.
You were an operator and then you learned about finance. I'm kind of curious about how you bridged that gap and what exactly you did to learn finance.
Yeah, in my first startup, it was called iSatellite. It was one of those door-knocking companies. We had a lot of inventory. We lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost inventory. I, as a salesperson, had to quickly learn how to run our books. I had to learn accounting. I had no training. My undergrad, I studied geography and political science. It wasn't until I went back to business school and my professor called me and this is not a compliment, by the way, a phenomenologist, somebody who figures out how they failed or didn't do well and comes back to study how to do it better. And so I married both the institutional understanding with sort of practical application. So that was me, knowing what I didn't know. There's a lot that I don't know what I don't know, right? But that's part of recognizing, weaknesses. So good question. Thanks for asking that. Other questions over here? Anybody else? Yeah, please.
So you mentioned that you kind of surround yourself with good people.
Yeah.
How do you choose those people?
Well, how do you choose who to date? I knew a great woman who used to say, who you date is who you marry. Who you surround yourself or who you're going to be doing business with. That woman was my mother. That's who you're going to do business with, who you're surrounded with. There are so many of those relationships. I had guys in my office yesterday, LDS mission friends or college friends, people that my general counsel is here today. We've worked together for 5 years, but I've worked with several other attorneys. He just happens to be the best. Right? So pick the best of the best and put yourself in an opportunity or a situation to do that. So great question. Others, please. Guys, yes, please.
You talked a lot about domestic investment. Are you willing to go into international or are you pursuing?
Yeah, I think we're willing to. It's just not part of our thesis. I think if we were to do that, it'd be more in the form of an ADR, sort of a traded, call it an equity that's traded in the U.S. but might be overseas, something in Brazil or Brazil, Russia, India, China, any of those others. But yeah, we would always look at it. If it's compelling enough, we'll always look at it. So that's a great question. Asking if we'd be interested in investing outside of sort of our domestic footprint. Other questions? I don't want to keep you too long. I know we're right at time.
To you, but I know that
Nope, it's great.
we'll have people starting to run off
Yep.
here. So let's bring it to a close here and thank James for his presentation today.
Thank you very much, Dean. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks.
And as always, if you've got a question that you